All right. Welcome to the Knicks Film School Postgame Show presented by BetUS. For a talk about this game, 114-112 Warriors win over the Knicks at MSG. I just want to say I don't know what's going on with Karl-Anthony Towns. Missed tonight, as we will certainly discuss for personal reasons, but hope everything's okay with him. You know, he's had a rough go at things over the years, obviously with his mom tragically passing away, and just hope that everything's okay. Regardless of having nothing to do with basketball. He's a really good guy. It's that much has become incredibly clear in his short time here already in New York. So hope the cat's all right. Good transition. That before I say anything about this game, I want to acknowledge Warriors had their full complement of players, other than Jonathan Kuminga, who hasn't played for them in a very long time. Whereas the Knicks were missing one of their two MVP candidates, one of their two all-star starters, a guy that, again, hopefully he's not out for too long, but on set to make all NBA. That impacted them. And we're going to talk about how it impacted them. Obviously, they only scored 102 points tonight. The offense was stuck in mud for much of the night. I want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge that the Knicks, went 8 of 33 from deep for a sterling percentage of 24.2%. I thought several of those looks were good looks that they missed. And if it wasn't for OG Anunoby having a game, we'll talk about that. They would have had probably their worst three-point shooting game of the season. So yeah, I want to acknowledge that. And I also want to acknowledge that Steph Curry is top 10 player of all time, who maybe is not the 100th percentile of himself right now at this stage of his career. But on some nights, and certainly tonight in some halves, he could certainly look like 96, 97, 98%, whatever number you're going to put. And there was nothing the Knicks weren't doing or doing poorly against him on defensively. I actually thought Mikal Bridges had a really good game defending Steph, even with him springing free a little bit there in the second half. I want to acknowledge all those things. And even in acknowledging all those things, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tell you that Tom Thibodeau lost the Knicks this basketball game. I'm going to say it again. Tom Thibodeau, the head coach that is supposed to help them win games, is the reason that they lost this one. Josh Hart, I love Josh Hart. He's one of my favorite current Knicks. He's honestly one of my favorite all-time Knicks. I love him because I love him for a lot of reasons. I love him because he cares about all the right things. I love him because he goes out there and he tries his hardest every game, puts his body on the line. I love him because he's mortal. He is not a perfect player. He has what some might call a fatal flaw with his jump shot that comes and goes and is never something that good teams are really going to guard. I love him. This is not a knock against Josh Hart, the player. Josh Hart didn't have it tonight. And actually, that's really being kind. Josh Hart was atrocious tonight. He was really bad. He's been, let's be polite and say iffy of late. He reached a new low tonight. He's going through it right now. A little bit of a crisis of confidence. Like he stopped taking 3-point shots altogether until it reached the point of absurdity. And then he's like, all right, I guess I got to take some of these again. Well, he's now putting up a few shots. He put up 4 tonight. Didn't come close on a single one of them. And whatever he is going through is impacting him in other ways. I did not think I would ever see him reach the level that he reached in the first half against Philadelphia early last week. And I would say, like, that was more the first half. This was over the course of a whole game. His final stat line, I'll just read it. minus 22, team worst, obviously. In 33 minutes, he was 1 of 8 from the field, missed all 4 of his threes, pulled down 8 rebounds, but only 1 on the offensive glass. Really was not a factor on the offensive glass at all. Had 2 turnovers and 3 assists, but I think even that's a little bit of a misnomer. Finished with 2 points. Atrocious game. Love Josh Hart. Part of the solution here. Winning player. Going to be around a long time. I hope to God they win championships and he gets his number retired. He was atrocious tonight. And yet, And it was very clear that he was atrocious tonight to anyone in the building. And yet, midway through the fourth quarter, with the Knicks down by 1, and the game goes to a timeout because the Knicks had been making a push. Josh Hart comes back in the game along with Jalen Brunson and Mikal Bridges. Now, putting Mikal Bridges in for Landry Shamet, totally fine with that. Mikal, we'll talk about Mikal on the offensive end. Again, I praised his defense. Didn't really have it from deep tonight. 1 of 5, 7 of 15 overall. Look, the offensive issues with Mikal Bridges are well documented. I don't think that he did anything particularly great tonight on the offensive end. But again, for defensive purposes, and because this is a guy who has made big plays for you, and it's not like he was having a terrible game. He was having, if anything, a slightly quiet game. But again, dude finished 7 of 15, and that included, I think, a couple of late garbage time misses because that was garbage time by the end. So put Bridges back in, fine with that. Put Brunson back in for campaign. Obviously, Jalen Brunson, best clutch player in the league this year. He was having himself a really good game. And yeah, love that. Great move. Wonderful. To put Josh Hart back in for Deuce McBride was nonsensical. And it's not that Deuce was having a great game either, to be very clear. He had 6 points, finished with 6 points, 2 of 7 from the field, 5 assists, no turnovers. It was a +8. But again, 24 minutes, like you can't make much out of that. There is no question to anyone who has watched this team recently that they reached their highest heights, at least right now. What they're going through some stuff. The starting lineup has been rough with Cat. They are better with Deuce McBride on the floor. And tonight, they were better with Deuce McBride on the floor. And it's not only because, and again, I know he took 2 threes tonight and missed both of them. It's not only because he is such a threat from deep and he needs to be honored from out there, but because there is a different life, there is a different spark, there is a different verb, any noun that you want to use when he is in the game. And that is on both ends of the floor. And I did not think it was a coincidence in the slightest. And I want to go back and I want to watch the tape because I'm not putting it on anybody in particular. But I did not think it was a coincidence at all that we come out of that timeout, which is, or not, it wasn't the substitutions, wasn't a timeout. Substitutions in between the first Anunoby free throw and the second one. And off of a missed free throw, Santos, a kid who is like, he wasn't great tonight, he didn't have a great line tonight, but like 90 some odd % of NBA players, you cannot leave him wide open with nobody near him behind the 3-point line. Gets the most open look that any Warrior has had all night. And what happens? There's a bunch of Knicks standing around with their palms up, looking around at each other. Like, oh, whose guy was that? Inexcusable. And again, was that on Brunson? Was that on Hart? Was that on Bridges? I'm not putting that on anyone, but it was a sign of things to come. Because the Warriors went on a run. The Knicks completely imploded. Couldn't get anything going on offense. Hart had the ball. It seemed like every time the ball touched Hart's hands, it was disaster. And again, nobody who was watching that game should have been surprised. And it was inexcusable. You want, now, I will give a slight caveat. You want to tell me that the lineup that he went to with 2.5 minutes left in the game, when the Knicks were all but out of it, where he took out Mitchell Robinson, who he had clearly been saving because he's on whether you want to call it a minutes limit, a minutes restriction, whatever. He played 15 minutes tonight. I think his limit is 18, and that makes sense because when he checked out with 2.5 minutes left to go, when Tibbs finally went small, he would have been on pace. He would have been on track for 18 minutes. So 18 minutes seems like that's where it's at right now. And I think that it probably is as much due to his conditioning as anything else, but we're neither here nor there. You want to tell me that, okay, leave Hart in the game and just bring in or keep in Deuce and just don't have a center. Take out Precious and like put it and just don't go with a center from the 6.5 minute mark. Fine. But then that's just yet another reason, why this one has to go on Tibbs' shoulders. We've seen more than enough evidence of what happens when you take Karl-Anthony Towns off the floor and you have Josh Hart on the floor with a non-spacing big, which is essentially all the minutes that Josh Hart has played this year without Karl-Anthony Towns on the floor. He has played with another non-spacing big because we haven't seen any minutes with OG Anunoby, at center. Either way, you want to tell me you should have gone to that? I would have been fine with that. Andrew Claudio, shout out to Andrew, was texting our group chat before the game saying, what are the odds that Tibbs goes small tonight with OG Anunoby at the 5? Perfect opportunity to do so against his team. And yeah, we saw it. We saw it when the game was over. It's not good enough. Now, there's always caveats. Going that small, needless to say, opens you up to offensive rebounds by the other team. It leaves you without a paint presence, without a traditional rim protector. And again, in those last 2.5 minutes when the game was on life support, we saw, the Warriors take advantage of that on a couple of possessions. Personally, I would have taken Hart out. I would have put Deuce in, and I would have gone with a traditional 5 and rolled with that. And maybe if that didn't work, then you go to the small ball. Or I would, if he was feeling more adventurous, could have gone to the small ball earlier. A plethora of options, none of which were selected. And instead, he went with the thing that very clearly was not working tonight at all. And it's incredibly frustrating. Did they deserve to win that game? No, they didn't. The Warriors were down 8 at halftime, and honestly, I thought they played better than the Knicks. They were just cold shooting. And the Knicks, they ended up with 105 points tonight, or 102 points tonight, excuse me, which is not great. And they got 29 points from OG Anunoby and 25 points from Jalen Brunson. And most of those were not a function of any kind of great offense. Most of those were just a function of those guys being really, really good. But and then, again, throw Mikal Bridges in there as well. 6 of 10 on 2-point shots. Again, most of those were self-created. So you look at it, OG, Jalen, Mikal, vast majority of their shots came from self-creation. Even the bench, you look at like Campaign, what he did, like there was a lot of heavy lifting going on tonight to score. And I guess that's a transition to talking about the cat angle of it, which is they're just not, like, this team does not have the capability of being the sort of offense that we saw them be at times last year without Karl-Anthony Towns, because the center position is so drastically different. What Isaiah Hartenstein brought to this team last year at the 5, even as a non-spacing big, didn't matter. What he brought there as a threat that if you're gonna put 2 on Jalen Brunson and you're gonna use a big man as a screener, and and Isaiah Hartenstein gets an ounce of space, you could throw it to him. How many times did the Knicks or did the Warriors put 2 on the ball tonight, when Jalen Brunson had it, and there was no obvious outlet, because whether it's Precious there or whether it's Mitch there, they're just not any kind of a threat on the short roll from 20 feet from the hoop. And then when you have Josh Hart serve as your screener, which the Knicks do from time to time, he wasn't all that much more effective. Might have been less effective. So they are going to have to continue to be creative to the extent that they can be, to try to generate points for as long as Karl-Anthony Towns misses time. Now, the flip side of that, was the defense better? Yeah, I thought the defense was better for portions of the night. And yet, we were reminded that New York's defensive issues are not all on Karl-Anthony Towns' shoulders. I thought you saw that, frankly, from the opening tip. Yeah, Warriors missed a lot of shots in the first half. I thought the Knicks played long stints of good defense in the first half. Second half, cut up to death. It's like Edward Scissorhands out there. Just absolutely sliced to shreds with cuts to the basket in the half court and obviously with some timely transition buckets as well. I wrote a newsletter today. Shout out to all my Substack people talking about how we're 60 games into the season, now 61 games into the season. We're still talking about the same shit. Still talking about communication issues, still talking about breakdowns that come as a result of trying to, get, Brunson out of disadvantageous matchups. Tonight, I don't know that how much of it was that. There were definitely some communication issues, and it's just, I thought the level of attentiveness, frankly, was not there in the second half, which you can't have at home, or you shouldn't have at least at home. So, no, I don't think the Knicks played particularly well tonight. Other than some nice offensive performances from some individual players. And yeah, Steph Curry was awesome, and I thought the Warriors played good ball. The Warriors have been playing top 5 ball, top 5, top 6, whatever, somewhere in that range since they got Jimmy Butler. And they are now 9-1 with Butler on the floor, or Butler in uniform, I should say. Me and Benji did our championship equity rankings for the Patreon pod last week. Again, shout out to all of our patrons. I had the Warriors in 5th as having the 5th most championship equity in the league, because I thought they had been so good with Butler, and at least you could squint and you could see it. I don't think they're making a deep run, but whatever. Enough about the Warriors. They're really good. But this night did not need to go down like it did. With an uncompetitive final 5 minutes of the game. And, I have, there's no bigger Tom Thibodeau fan on the planet outside of maybe his family than me. And one of the things I've praised him for over the years is that whereas other coaches will go more with what the moment dictates, perhaps to the detriment of the long term. And I think the one thing where you have, Tibbs has many reputations. One of them is his players that are loyal to him to the death, perhaps to a fault. And one of the reasons players who jive with his style are loyal to him is because he is loyal to them, oftentimes, to a fault. Does that pay dividends in the long term? I'm sure it does. And I'm sure Josh Hart, is going to know he didn't have it tonight. Obviously, he knows he didn't have it tonight. He seems like a player who's fairly honest with himself. And the fact that he wasn't riding the bench at the end, but again, I talked about I'll end with this and then we'll move on. I talked about this with Jeremy on the pod that dropped yesterday, whatever it was. Yeah, we recorded it last night. Bench McCall against the Heat. And I just pointed out, I'm like, I don't know if McCall's one of Tibbs' guys yet. Not say he doesn't like McCall, not say he doesn't appreciate him, but is he one of his guys? And I contrasted that with Josh Hart. We know Josh Hart is one of Tibbs' guys. And I said it on the pod. I said, he's going to go with him through thick and thin. And we saw it tonight, and it bit the Knicks in the ass. So, all the caveats, no cat, great Steph, bad three-point shooting, the whole thing. You were due for a clunker in a close game in a clutch situation. All that is fine. Still, this one still gets under my skin. And I wish we would have seen the end of this basketball game, at least with the players on the floor who would have given them the best chance to win. And that did not happen. So, frustrating.